Good afternoon and welcome to all of you who have joined us this beautiful afternoon and on Valentine's Day. We were a bit concerned. We had 230 RSVPs and 10 minutes ago the room was empty. So we thought that people had better plans for Valentine's, but clearly important event. Everyone's eager to hear from Ilan. My name is Denise Yanovich and I am the Managing Director of the Georgetown Americas Institute. It is a pleasure to have all of you here. The Georgetown Americas Institute was established in 2020, and it's a platform for dialogue, research, and impact around the key challenges facing Latin America and the hemisphere. It comes at a moment where our hemisphere is at a crossroads. Notable economic and social progress has been achieved since the 1980s. The region remains the most democratic in the developing world, and its democracies have shown resilience and vitality despite challenging circumstances. Recently, however, there is growing evidence of democratic backsliding and economic instability and inequality in the Americas. Increasingly, citizens are taking to the streets to express their discontent with the political and economic systems and government elites. Incumbents and traditional political parties have not fulfilled citizens' expectations. Throughout the hemisphere, citizens are demanding change. We are entering a pivotal decade for the Americas. It will require greater engagement from interested parties to positively impact and devise solutions. Georgetown University is uniquely positioned to drive and contribute to discussions around fundamental issues for the future of the hemisphere. An important part of our programming includes a Conversation with Leaders series, conversations and lectures with influential leaders in the Western Hemisphere to discuss current issues, the state of affairs in the region, and their opinions on leadership, governance, politics, foreign affairs, and management. As part of this series, we are delighted to host a conversation with Ilan Goldfajn, who recently assumed the position of President of the Inter-American Development Bank. Alejandro Werner, the Director of the Georgetown Americas Institute, will be moderating the discussion. But before turning it over to Alejandro, I want to thank Kate Lancet, the Program Associate of the Georgetown Americas Institute, for all her work putting together this event, as well as all of our student volunteers, in particular the students of the Latin American Caribbean Policy Association who have joined us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denise. And let me introduce Ilan. I think he does not need any introduction, but we will give one. I mean, he has an impressive resume. I mean, Ilan assumed the position at the Inter-American Development Bank on December 19th or 20, just after the Monday after the World Cup. I mean, he timed that perfectly. And he has been working with his team to launch his new strategy at the bank at a time in which, as Denise was saying, I mean, Latin America is facing very important challenges, and the relationship between Latin America, the US, and other big geopolitical powers is being rejigged, and therefore I think the role of the bank could become even more important than in the past. Before that, Ilan was the director of the Western Hemisphere Department at the IMF for a year. Before that, he was the governor of the Central Bank of Brazil for 3 years, from 2016 to 2019. And I guess almost 2 decades before that, he used to be deputy governor of the Central Bank of Brazil as well. In the middle, he worked at the private sector, in academia, in the private sector at one of the largest banks in Brazil, being the chief economist and partner at Itaú. And after he left the central bank, he was the president of the board of advisors of Credit Suisse Brazil. And with a lot of foresight, I mean, not knowing what was going to happen to Credit Suisse, he moved and came to Washington. And I think he has been doing an amazing job, helping the region a lot, first from the IMF and now assuming this position at the IDB. So with that, I mean, we're really honored and thankful that you decided to come and engage with us and with the Georgetown community in a discussion regarding what should be the role of the bank in really cooperating, helping the region to really find a new path of inclusive growth and prosperity. So with that, Ilan, you gave your inaugural speech on January 12th. Please, I mean, share with us your initial thoughts on where the region is, what's the strategy for the IDB to tackle these challenges, to help the region tackle these challenges, and then we will have a conversation around your thoughts on these topics.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alejandro, for this introduction, for inviting me. It's an honor to follow your footsteps at the IMF, at the MIT first, then the IMF, and I hope to continue to have good foresight. Maybe that's a good foresight for the region going forward. I want to thank Georgetown Americas Institute, Georgetown University. I want to thank the students to come here on Valentine's Day to hear us instead of being somewhere else. With the hat of IDB, I know Georgetown has quite a bit of collaboration with IDB, in particular the IDB Lab, which is our innovation laboratory that deals with startups and new enterprises, and we have partnership with the Global Human Development Program, the Institute for the Study of International Migration at the School of Foreign Service, and Georgetown's Latin America Leadership Program. I think we are now entering a period of quite a bit of challenges in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I will share with you a bit my diagnosis of what's happening in the region, what is the vision that I would like to see the region in the future. I also will talk a little bit about what I believe a regional bank in Latin America and the Caribbean should have the priorities. So let me talk about what I think are the main challenges. We have seen in the region quite a bit of demand for I will call it public goods, public services. We have seen populations demand for transportation, better health services. They are not accepting poverty, the levels they are, nor inequality in the ways they are in Latin America. And inequality here, we're talking about income inequality, but I think there is a perception of unfairness on other inequality, gender, diversity. There is also perception that governments are not fulfilling their roles in Latin America. And not only because of the pandemics, but I think it's more a structural thing. And governments are being elected in Latin America with the mandate to change all of that. At the same time, we are in a region where debts are high, fiscal resources are scarce. So really, you don't have resources available to fulfill all the promises that authorities and governments are being elected. So you'll say, well, why don't you generate the resources? But here's the problem. We used to call it decades, lost decades. But we are coming from lost decade to another lost decade to another lost decade. Can we still call it decades? I think the only decade that was not lost was the 2003 to 2013. That was the commodity boom, where part of the region, because of the commodities, did grow. but still less than other regions. So you're not actually generating resources, there's no productivity growth, you're not investing enough, and you are demanded to provide better services in a moment where debts were high, but they are now higher because of the pandemic. So this is the triple challenge: social needs, high debts, low productivity growth. And what can you do? I think we need to help the region deal with that. How do you deal with it? First, the IDB has a core mandate for the first part, which is social issues. Help with sanitation, with education, with health services, with food insecurity. I don't know if you have the data, but we have seen since 2015, insecurity, food insecurity has been growing. Even before the pandemic, and even before food prices rose because of the pandemic and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, food insecurity was on the rise. And that's part of the mandate of the IDB. So that part needs to be a core where you have to provide the resources, both financing, technical assistance, but clearly be able to attract financing from other sources, private sector, PPPs, public and private partnerships to do that. So that's one area that we need to develop. The second one is that if you're gonna grow, you need investments. There are studies at the IDB where they show that the infrastructure gaps are much larger in Latin America and Caribbean than in other regions. So if you are able to close this gap relative to, for example, the OECD, you'll have 8% level change in terms of GDP. There is a need to finance both physical infrastructure, but also digital infrastructure. Financing digital infrastructure has the advantage of being able to connect people. And I've been talking to a lot of entrepreneurs and people innovating, and a lot of the innovations have to do with digitalization, the way you are gonna use the new world to provide inclusion, to provide knowledge, to find the gaps and the limits. But if the region is not connected, if we have places where people cannot reach digitally, you will lose a lot of the productivity growth. In the infrastructure world, but also in other places, I believe the regional banks are in the position today to try to concentrate in projects that are more regional. The way multilateral organizations were created, and regional banks too, where they were created to fulfill mandates of sovereign countries. So that's the way IMF is organized, part of the IDB is organized, the World Bank, where you have countries, and you're thinking about how can I help countries. But increasingly, we need projects that go from one country to the other. So if you're gonna unite electricity, digital world, transportation, you need to think about the region, not only the countries. And it's easier for organizations that have a mandate for the region than countries that have a mandate to attend their populations. After all, even though if integration helps a specific country, the interest at the end of the day is to attend your population, the population that voted on you. But the IDB is a place where the mandate and the comparative advantage is for the region. So I think that we need to be able to promote all these projects that go from one country to the other, and we have quite a bit of them, including in the third priority, which is climate. So the first priority is social needs, social issues. The second, infrastructure, investment, both digital and not, regional integration. The third one is climate. And here is a public good where the benefits of working with mitigation plans to fulfill the targets, the Paris targets that are set, go beyond what each country does. And the impact of what we are not doing has an impact in the region. Just to give you an example. In Latin America, we have the Caribbean and Central America that are especially hit by natural disasters. We used to have a hurricane or a natural event that will wipe out the islands. 25% of GDP you'll lose in one event, sometimes 50%. And that happened every 10 years. Now it's happening every 3 years. So that impact of climate change is already happening in the region. And when we ask a country in the region to reduce emissions and fulfill the targets, it goes beyond the benefit for the country. It's a global public good. And we have to rethink the role of the multilateral organizations so that we are now fulfilling roles for public goods, not only for specific countries that we were organized 60 years ago, as the IDB 63 years ago, or 80 years ago, as the other IFIs, international financial institutions. So those are the priorities: social, regional integration and investment infrastructure, and climate, mitigation and adaptation. Public goods, regional integration, things that I believe regional banks should have comparative advantage. I will stop here so that we can have more conversation, and I can talk about the vision for the IDB in general for the region. But let me just stop here so that we can get into the questions.
Thank you very much, Ilan, and I guess very, very insightful, both your view of where the region stands and what challenges that presents also for the bank. In a way, maybe we can start in this trade-off that you were maybe insinuating in your last comment. First, you told us that Latin America has gone through lost decade after lost decade, with a window of high growth with the commodity boom, and then COVID came, and that even deepened our social gaps, inherent in inflation and poverty, etc. Then you said, on the other hand, we have a humanity's existential challenge with climate change that is affecting us right now. It's affecting us. Yeah, okay, it's affecting us right now, but its major impacts will come maybe with a longer horizon than the immediate challenges of poverty, income inequality, gender, etc., that you mentioned. And on the other hand, these countries are starving for resources because they have a fiscal problem. Let's not call it a crisis. You mentioned high debt. So how can you help them square this circle a little bit in terms of fulfilling their commitments to the international community in terms of emission reductions, but at the same time attending to the immediate challenges that the populations are pressing them to do, no? So what is the stage of the thinking at the bank on how to help countries advance on all these fronts at a point in time in which also, I mean, they're not able to place debt, 10-year debt at 360 like the US, and then they can do a lot, no? But the challenges are very large in terms of satisfying these multiple demands.
So I think you put it very well. It's there are multiple demands, objectives, global objectives, existential human existence, issues on global warming and where we need to go. There are very immediate challenges, food security, social issues demanded by population. So what is the priority? And you ask me, what is the stage we are? The stage we are is that we identify these issues, and they are clearly, all of them are irrelevant. But I enter the bank saying, if all of them are priorities, we may lose focus in the sense that we will then may not be able to do everything. So we will need to have a ranking of where do we start, where do we continue, what do we do in the short run, what do we do in the medium run, what can complement each other, what are the transversal elements that can be worked on all of them. And that's, I think, it will be our goal in establishing the institutional strategy for the IDB for the next 5 years. And we will do it this year. Of course, the bank will not stop. We will continue these priorities I mentioned, but exactly how we will transform the bank in order to have a real impact on people, on people's lives. We will have to deepen these issues and make the difficult choices, because those are very difficult choices. What do you do first? If you sum all the needs we have, it's clearly beyond what public institutions have available. So when we talk about transversal issues, I think there are two topics that we need to work on. First, realize that public money will not be enough to do all what we need to do. If you are in the climate, if you're a specialist in climate, you know that if just for the climate transition, the resources are not enough. If you sum all of them that we just talked, then it's all. That's even more scarce. So it is clear that we need to somehow be able to attract private money to the equation. How do we attract private resources, private savings to help? So here's where some ideas are floating. Some of them are here for some time. So first, what exists? Famous PPPs, private-public partnerships, where the public enters, the private sector enters, and we do projects together. At the IDB, there has been quite a bit of progress on that. There is a one window, one single entry, where if you are a company or a government, you enter the same window and they direct you either to the public part of the IDB or to the private side, which is the IDB Invest. And we deal it as a joint group where we will do private and public at the same time. And there's quite a bit of platforms and an effort of that, so that needs to continue and be even more relevant. Second, we need to leverage on the fact that there is awareness of some of these needs. For example, climate. Private sector is increasingly concerned about ESG. So when we do an IDB Invest, the private, we bring together companies, investment, financial institutions that would like to invest. They have the perception by their stakeholders that they need to invest in sustainable development, but they partner with the institutional government like the IDB because they think, well, this is the way to be there. I will be more secure if I partner with the IDB so that I can deploy these resources together. And increasingly, this is part of that. So the buzzword is you catalyze private money with your public sector. So that needs to be part of the solution. The other part of so PPPs, you bring capital money to invest with you because they understand your knowledge and your expertise, so they feel secure. Third, we need to be able to use the public resources to reduce the risk or to distribute the risk in a better way. And this, the way I'm saying it, is more financial. So the public sector should enter to give guarantees or to have a debt which is less senior. So it means that the first losses are yours, so that the private sector feels, well, yes, this type of risk I'm willing to run, because you, the public sector, are giving me some guarantees, or you are also, if it's not guarantees, you're willing to take the first loss, if it's that. Or you're willing to put equity instead of debt, which is normal the way to do it, or now you're willing to use concessional money, which is not, you don't get it back, or you're willing to do equity, which means that you can lose your money. If the public sector is willing to take these risks, maybe we are going to get a multiplier of the private sector. So we need to think about the ways to increase the pot. Just to keep looking inside and say this is not enough will not get us there. At the same time, we need to do two other things. One, we need to help countries increase their resources and productivity growth, innovation. That needs to continue to be an important part of it. Because if we just say, well, we are not growing, that's the last decade, just forget about it, we need to generate the resources to make it happen. Last but not least, we need to be effective. What does it mean? We need to be very concerned and very alert that public money is dear. And when we deploy the resources, we need to be very effective. What does it mean in practice? That when we provide a loan or technical assistance, we need to go beyond saying our portfolio is $80 billion. We have just lent to X country $1 billion, or we have given $100 million to this Caribbean. That's very good. But we have to go beyond that. We have to say how many individuals we have lived our poverty. How much more people we have been able to provide sanitation. Have we changed the gender gap? Have we closed it? Have we really changed the matrix in terms of climate sustainable? So we need to go directly to the outcome and be very clear where are we using our resources. We need to just, and that's not only the IDB, I will say this is mostly both public and private way of thinking about it. This is how much money we have deployed. We need to go beyond that and say this is how much we have generated of development impact, and there's a war for its effectiveness. So this is the combination where I think we try to square the cycle, which is more private sector, more effectiveness, and the fact that we need to do things better.
Very comprehensive, the way you are approaching the problem of bringing in the private sector, and also I think through the work, through the core work of the bank. I remember when I used to work in Mexico, the bank, the teams at the bank were extremely helpful in helping us draft the public-private partnerships law. And that by itself, setting the right incentives, as you were saying at the end, brings a lot of capital in. And I mean, we thought we were super smart working with the bank, smarter than everybody else. Then when I came to Washington, I started going through the region. I discovered that every country got the support of the same team from the IDB to draft the same law, and it was having a very important regional effect in terms of attracting capital. So the role of the bank goes significantly beyond the $100 billion or whatever of exposure they have to the region, by really helping the region set up institutions on the social part, on the financial side, et cetera, to really catalyze, as you were saying, good policies and private sector actions on that. I mean, very briefly before we open it up, you mentioned regional projects that we have a little bit, even more than in other regions, maybe in Latin America, we have a vacuum of effective regional institutional setup, and you were hinting that the bank can help the region coordinate for the very important regional projects we might have on the digital way or traditional infrastructure. You mentioned electricity, energy in general, climate change, etc. So what are the main projects that can be policies or investment infrastructure projects that could really have the largest impact on this regional integration that Latin America is lacking?
I'm not sure exactly which ones have the more impact. This is still a work in progress, so that we set on the priorities the fact that regional integration should be something that we have the comparative advantage with the bank. So let's see what's available. What I can tell you is things that are already in the bank and maybe can be done more. So we have quite a bit of intention to integrate electricities from one country to the other, lines of transmission, because if you are very separated, you are less diversified. You may have problems in one place, but you cannot transfer to the others, and this is a problem. So if you are more connected, things get, shocks get diversified, natural shocks, natural disasters in that. In the same vein, on connectivity, there are regions where we have emptiness, and those regions are not in one country, are in places. And you can join effort to connect people, to enter together, investment together to do that. It's a challenge, because usually today we have a fund, we use the fund to give country loans, country projects, and we don't give the loans to regions. And really what you're financing is the region. And we need to find a way to have regional funds and regional projects with regional guarantees. How we're going to do it is a new way to think about them. So connectivity, integration in terms of electricity and others, and finally on biodiversity. There is a new, I will say a new environment, a new effort to preserve the Amazon. I mean, we now have new governments in the region, and they are now into, we need to preserve the biodiversity. And the Stud has something more general than just deforestation, is keeping the population there, the way that they, giving them livelihood so that they can live in a sustainable way. So there's quite a bit of effort now. The Amazon is a regional project because the Amazon is Brazil, it's Colombia, it's Peru, it's Ecuador, Guyana, Venezuela. I hope I don't forget any country. But we need to think together about them. And that's climate projects.
Thanks. So let me open the floor to questions from our students, and we can start with you, and then we go with you. And so we take 3 questions, and then you answer them, and then we do another round of 3 questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldfajn. Muito obrigado for being here with us. I just wanted to say, in the name of everyone here from Brazil, we miss you in our central bank. We miss the low inflation and the low interest rates. But more than that, we miss someone that said what you said, which is money from the public sector is sacred. And you know this better than me, but we have a president now that is notorious for using money from our development bank in projects in Venezuela, Cuba, Mozambique, Angola, you name it. And many times the money is considered genuinely to be a bad investment. I wanted to know, what is the relationship that you want to have with the Inter-American Development Bank, with the BNDES and the development banks that are national from the domestic governments in South America?
Thank you.
Hi, Ilan. Congratulations. We're really looking forward to seeing you generate a lot of impact in the region. So all our eyes are on you. So I'm Giselle, and I've been in the development world for over a decade. So a lot of the things that you mentioned, that will be your focus. We've been working on those things for a while, right? Regional integration, which I think we have all been trying to push for several years. Climate change, of course. But my question to you is, and over the last decade, the IDB, the IFC, and other multilaterals have more than doubled the programs in the region, precisely financing infrastructure projects, and obviously now all the projects related to climate change, right? So, but the issue is that you see all this amount of investments coming from multilaterals, and at the same time, you continue to see this huge inequality in Latin America. So the same way that you're trying to tackle climate change, precisely because you know that climate change has a lot of economic costs, right, to the region, then the same way inequality has huge economic cost. Let's say you want to tackle climate change, but, with the situation, like for example, in Peru or in Colombia, and all mostly driven by inequalities and the fact that people are, would like the system change. So you can expect a lot of value destruction because of that inequality as well, right? I mean, even though you want to invest in infrastructure and all of those projects and climate change, you won't be able to find the projects to finance them just because of the political insecurities and inequality and political instabilities in those countries, right? So what's your strategy to try to reduce inequalities? your country being one of the most unequal countries in all Latin America. Thank you very much, and good luck.
So let's take. So yeah, let's go with you, and then take the three.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I just have a quick question regarding democracies. How does the IDB deals with weak and corrupt democracies in Latin America?
So we can start with those easy questions.
So let me start with going the same order that they were asked. On development banks in the countries, they actually have an important role with the IDB. The IDB cannot reach country realities in a very dispersed way. So you use national banks to be able to distribute. So for example, if we want to reach SMEs, it's very difficult for the IDB to go and talk to each SMEs. You can actually do platforms where they all can get there, but if you want to have an impact, you need to partner with local banks that have a distribution or have a way to get into the region. So in the case of the region, yes, there is already for some time partnership between the IDB and the national development banks, where you use the national development banks to reach smaller enterprises or more plural objectives that you cannot reach. It's easier to have projects with sovereigns, big projects with the country, or even big projects with subnationals. But sometimes you want to reach a broader public or a broader group, and then you need to partner with with those national development banks. Not only the state banks, but sometimes are private banks that you can partner. On the issues of you mentioned on inequality, and yes, it has been there for some time. Some of the issues that we are raising are not new to the region. Actually, the challenges I mentioned, which are social issues, lack of growth, fiscal constraints of high debt, are not new to the region. I think they are more exacerbated now. I think the societies are even less patient with the government about inequality, about poverty. We are seeing the results, both elections, but also demonstrations. So yes, the problems were there. The IDB was there trying to do, but I think now it's getting more exacerbated. Debt, yes, has been an issue for some time, but now we got the pandemic, and we had quite a bit of spending during the pandemic, so debts were increased even more. So we have now even a more important fiscal challenge there. So yes, problems are not for today, and so the question is, how do you get into to solve inequalities? And it's not an easy answer. I think we need to have clearly more social protection. I don't think the region is there yet. I think we have quite a bit of programs of transfers, and some countries that have more successful projects, but others don't have. And the region is quite informal, maybe more than other places. So to reach the ones that need is sometimes harder. So that's something that we could build on. There's also the case of other type of inequalities. like gender or diversity, and that we can work where your projects or your effort, your technical assistance is linked to also targets. So the other day we were talking about infrastructure companies in Latin America that have a more gender and diverse group of leaders. And that's not a substitute, it's a could be complement. And most of the other projects could be a transversal objectives of not only investing more, but you invest more with a different type of gender perspective. So I think you can have a new lens to old problems too, and that's important. On the issue of democracy, I think there are two dimensions to look at it. One dimension is what are we doing in terms of our loans and our engagement with the countries. And here is where we need to be very careful on the core values of what we do. So you won't lend to some project or some place where you feel that the core values are not there. Democracy, but also rule of law and ethics. So you need to be very, very careful of where are you putting your effort and your resources. And that means that we need to be agile, but maybe less agile than other places because I'm pushing for agility. And the answer I'm getting, the pushback is yes, but we need to be careful on that and that. So there must be some middle ground on preserving the values and still be agile in terms of providing the resources immediately. And the second dimension in terms of democracy is a basic dimension of dialogue, of being able to promote institutions that look for moderation. We are in a polarized world, and it's very easy for leaders to get into us against them. We are right, they are wrong. So if we are able in leadership positions to say, well, can we find a middle ground? Can we find a way to go without getting into these polarized positions? I think it's going to be very helpful for democracy. And in Latin America, in the region, we do have quite a bit of geopolitical issues, different opinions. And what I mentioned since the beginning was that I hope to be a leader that promotes conversation, that promotes bridges between the views of the regional members of the IDB, the non-regional, the large countries, the smaller countries, the borrowers, the non-borrowers. There are quite a bit of different views and interests. So I think we will promote democracy if we, in our institutions, promote the dialogue and can be able to have bridges so that we can move together in the same direction.
So in the spirit of promoting this dialogue, let's take one final question from the left and one from the right. So we close with that. So maybe over there.
Take one from the center.
It's empty, that's the problem. No?
That's a polarized world.
Thank you for your overview. I think it was quite interesting what you were saying on creating public-private partnerships. And I'm curious to know, in a context where several countries in Latin America had been suffer like a degradation in their sovereign debt, what are the strategies of the bank to promote these partnerships to attract more private investment? Thank you.
Hi, thank you again for being here today. I'm really inspired by the work the IDB Lab is doing in investing in venture capital funds in the region. I know you mentioned innovation, but what do you think the role of venture capital is in fostering growth, and how will groups like the IDB Lab work against drawbacks or obstacles like regulations and limited exit opportunities for startups in the region?
Okay. So how can we attract private money? I mentioned a few general ideas. I did not mention that part of the investments in the region depend on rule of law that we talk here, on having stability, on building institutions. So part of the effort of the IDB is to help the countries to build the institutions they need to attract money. So Alejandro mentioned the PPPs way before I joined the IDB. I won't tell you how way before it was, but a long time ago, on creating the laws and creating the regulations and creating that. So that's an effort which is quite important, because if you are able to do it, private money gets into the country. And when I talk to companies, for example, I talk to European companies investing in Latin America and the Caribbean, they tell me, we need your help. And when they say we need your help, they're thinking about, we need rule of law, we need stability, we need simple and very clear regulation. We need to be able to go from one country to the other and not be so dramatically change the rules and the way you do your business from one country to the other. So that's what they are telling us. Help us provide the environment so that we can invest. So that's one. Then there is always the, I would say, fascinating world of innovation in terms of instruments. So there are now these bonds where you issue the bond and you have your target, for example, in terms of climate targets. And you provide an extra incentives to reach the targets by reducing the cost of the loan if the country reaches the target. If it goes, if it goes beyond the target, the loan cost reduce. So you have an incentive by giving some subsidy implicit in the contract of the law of reaching the target. Now they are thinking about putting another ingredient in these bonds, which is you have two sides. If you go beyond your targets, you get a reduction. But if somehow you fail and you actually go above the targets, you pay more. And you think, why do you want to pay more? Because the cost of the bond is much lower if the borrower assumes part of the risks of not achieving the target. So having two sides reduces the average cost of the bond. So this is a fascinating world of where we're trying to somehow distribute the risk in different ways so that we can attract also more private capital. And you may ask, why this attracts? Because sometimes private capital feels that they are willing to take some type of risks, but they are not willing to take other type of risks. So if we think about where we can be using our public resources, we may want to be able to complement the risk tolerance or risk aversion of private sector in such a way that we can attract more money. IDB Lab is quite interesting. I think the IDB is quite proud of the IDB Lab because this goes with partnering with startups and innovation and venture capital, and it's kind of not very uniform across regional banks and other institutions to have a lab. It's not so common. You need to be able to invest resources with the mind that you're taking more risks, because you know what happened in this venture capital is that most of the investment fail, but if you get one right, it's quite a bit of a leap forward. For private capital, the venture capital means that the return is so high that they compensate for the others. From a point of view of public sector, it means that if we get one right, the innovation is such that you may get productivity, which is the other element that we are missing here. A jump in productivity that we want to have. Get 1, 2, 3 innovations that are very good, that will make a difference.
I think, our time is up. It has been a very exciting and insightful conversation. I think you've been at the job less than 2 months, so it's impressive how clear the design of your agenda it's coming, and we will welcome you a year from now to tell us exactly how things coalesce around the strategy, how the strategy is being implemented, and how you sold it to the shareholders, to the staff, etc., and how the agenda is it's advancing. I think, a lot of people in the region and here in Washington are very excited to see you at the helm of the IDB, and with very high hopes of what the IDB and you and your team can do to help the region get out of this decade by decade of lost opportunities. And I think we're all very thankful that you dropped by. We will continue to invite you, and we hope to continue this dialogue, and wish you the best of luck in the next 5 years at the helm of the IDB, President Goldfajn.
Thank you very much.